Welcome to Relevance. The world's greatest podcast, hosted by author Mike R. Aikins, where they dare to talk about topics that really matter. Welcome to Relevance. The world's greatest podcast, hosted by author Mike R. Aikins, where they dare to talk about topics that really matter.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Chapter 5. Specialized Knowledge. Personal experiences or observations. The fourth step to riches. There are two kinds of knowledge. One is general, the other is specialized. General knowledge, no matter how great in quantity or variety it may be, is of but little use in the accumulation of money. The faculties of the great universities possess, in the aggregate, practically every form of general knowledge known to civilization. They specialize in teaching knowledge, but do not specialize in the organization or the use of knowledge. Knowledge would not attract money unless it is organized and intelligently directed through practical plans of action to the definite end of accumulation of money. Lack of understanding of this fact has been the source of confusion to millions of people who falsely believe that knowledge is power. It is nothing of the sort. Knowledge is only potential power. It becomes only when and if it is organized into definite plans of action and directed to a definite end. This missing link in all systems of education known to civilization today may be found in the failure of educational institutions to teach their students how to organize and use knowledge after they acquire it. Many people make the mistake of assuming that because Henry Ford had but little schooling, he is not a man of education. Those who make this mistake do not know Henry Ford, nor do they understand the real meaning of the word educate. That word is derived from the Latin word educo, meaning to educe, to draw out, to develop from within. An educated person is not necessarily one who has an abundance of general or specialized knowledge. Educated people have developed the faculties of their minds so that they may acquire anything they want or its equivalent without violating the rights of others. Henry Ford comes well within the meaning of this definition. During World War I, a Chicago newspaper published certain editorials in which, among other statements, Henry Ford was called an ignorant pacifist. Mr. Ford objected to the statements and brought a suit against the paper for libeling him. When the suit was tried in the courts, the attorneys for the paper pleaded justification and placed Mr. Ford himself on the witness stand for the purpose of proving to the jury that he was ignorant. The attorneys asked Mr. Ford a great variety of questions, all of them intended to prove by his own evidence that while he might possess considerable specialized knowledge pertaining to the manufacture of cars, he was, in the main, ignorant. Mr. Ford was plied with such questions as the following. Who was Benedict Arnold? And how many soldiers did the British seem to send over to America to put down the rebellion of 1776? In answer to the last question, Mr. Ford replied, I do not know the exact number of soldiers the British sent over, but I have heard that it was considerably larger number than ever went back. Finally, Mr. Ford became tired of this line of questioning. In reply to a particularly offensive question, he leaned over, pointed his finger at the lawyer who asked the question, and said, if I should really want to answer the foolish question you have just asked, or any of the questions you have been asking me, let me remind you that I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk, and by pushing the right button, I can summon to my aid people who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business to which I am devoting most of my efforts. Now, will you kindly tell me why I should clutter up my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions, when I have people around me who can supply any knowledge I require? There certainly was good logic to that reply. That answer floored the lawyer. Every person in the courtroom realized it was an answer not of an ignorant man, but of a man of education. Any person is educated who knows where to get knowledge when needed and how to organize that knowledge into definite plans of action. Through the assistance of his mastermind group, Henry Ford had at his command all the specialized knowledge he needed to enable him to become one of the wealthiest men in America. It was not essential that we have this knowledge in his own mind. Surely, no person who has sufficient inclination and intelligence to before you can be sure of your ability to transmute desire into its monetary equivalent, you will require specialized knowledge of the service, merchandise, or profession you intend to offer in return for fortune. Perhaps you may need much more specialized knowledge than you have the ability or the inclination to acquire, and if this should be true, you may bridge your weakness through the aid of your mastermind group. Carnegie stated that he personally knew nothing about the technical end of the steel business. Moreover, he did not particularly care to know anything about it. The specialized knowledge he required for the manufacture and marketing of steel, he found available through individual units of his mastermind group. The accumulation of great fortunes call for power, and power is acquired through highly organized and intelligently directed specialized knowledge. But that knowledge does not necessarily have to be in possession of the person who accumulates the fortune. The preceding paragraph gives hope and encouragement to individuals with ambition to accumulate a fortune who have not acquired the necessary education to supply such specialized knowledge as may be needed. People sometimes go through life suffering from inferiority complexes because they do not have formal education. The person who can organize and direct a mastermind group of people who possess knowledge useful in the accumulation of money is just as much an educated person as anyone in the group. Remember this if you suffer from a feeling of inferiority because your schooling has been limited. Thomas A. Edison had only 3 months of schooling during his entire life. He did not lack education, neither did he die poor. Henry Ford had limited schooling, but he managed to do pretty well by himself, financially. The fact that Ford and Edison did not have much formal schooling does not give today's young people an excuse to drop out of school. Today, a minimum standard of formal education is necessary to get a good start in the business world. Of course, there are exceptions. Dave Thomas, who founded the Wendy's restaurant chain, was a dropout. After he achieved success, he encouraged youngsters to continue their schooling. He backed this up by choosing to be an example to dropouts by working to get his own high school diploma 45 years after he left high school. He took and passed the General Education Development Exam, the equivalent of a high school diploma. He was awarded the diploma during a special ceremony at the school in the community in which he resides in Florida. Thomas addressed more than 500 students from the school, as well as GED candidates from across the state. He said, "Being a high school dropout has always bothered me, but I guess I always thought it was too late to get my diploma. said an enthusiastic Thomas. Now I know it's never too late, and maybe this will inspire others to do the same. The inspiration to get his diploma came to Thomas during a cross-country book tour promoting his autobiography, Dave's Way. In many cities, Thomas met with high school journalists, answering their questions, offering advice, and encouraging students to stay in school and succeed. These high school journalists were very sharp, said Thomas. They kept asking me why I say education is so important, yet I never finished school. Why didn't I practice what I preached? I didn't have an answer, so I decided to get my high school diploma. His goal is to publicize to school dropouts, whether they're recently dropped out or whether it's been years since they've been in school, that it's never too late to graduate. I tell people to get all the education they possibly can. The fact that I got my diploma 45 years after dropping out shows that it's never too late, said Thomas. Even when everything that's happened in my life, getting this diploma is one of the most important accomplishments. It pays to know how to purchase knowledge. First of all, decide on the sort of specialized knowledge you require and the purpose for which it is needed. To a large extent, your major purpose in life, the goal toward which you are working, will help determine what knowledge you need. With this question settled, your next move requires that you accurate information concerning dependable sources of knowledge. The more important of these are. With this question settled, your next move requires that you have accurate information concerning dependable sources of knowledge. The more important of these are A. One's own experience and education. B. Experience and education available through cooperation of others. C. Colleges and universities. D. Public libraries, through books and periodicals in which may be found all of the knowledge organized by civilization. E. Special training courses, through evening classes and distance learning courses in particular. As knowledge is acquired, it must be organized and put into use for a definite purpose through practical plans. Knowledge has no value except which can be gained from its application toward some worthy end. This is one reason why university degrees are not guarantees of successful careers. If you contemplate taking additional schooling, first determine the purpose for which you want the knowledge you are seeking, then learn where this particular sort of knowledge can be obtained from reliable sources. Successful people in all callings never stop acquiring specialized knowledge related to their major purpose, business or profession. Those who are not successful usually make the mistake of believing that the knowledge acquiring period ends when they finish school. The truth is that schooling does little more than point one in the direction of how to acquire practical knowledge. Year after year, university career advisors report that recruiters who came to their campuses are chiefly interested in hiring students who have studied in a specialized field such as business management, computer science, mathematics, chemistry, and other areas that prepare them to move rapidly into productive jobs rather than liberal arts students who have broader but unspecialized schooling. However, there are many students with great potential who did not choose a specialization. However, there are many students with great potential who did not choose a specialization because they were not sure at age 18 to 20 in what areas they wanted to make their careers. Many of these men and women have a diversified education as undergraduates, but chose a career-oriented postgraduate qualification. Young readers of this book should not rush into choosing a specialty until they learn enough about what the field entails, its opportunities, and its disadvantages. Most universities and colleges provide information and guidance to students to help them make this key decision. Whether or not such guidance is available, students should explore a variety of fields, read as much as possible about that field, and talk with people who currently are engaged in that type of work. Not all careers require university degrees. Other types of training are available. Most universities have continuing education programs for people who want specialized knowledge. Some offer knowledge. Desirous of either learning a new field or honing their skills in that field can take a series of carefully designed courses to obtain the necessary knowledge. These courses are given in the evening or at weekends and are usually attended by adults rather than college-age students. Home study programs, often referred to as distance learning, are available by correspondence or through the internet. One advantage of home study is the flexibility of the program that permit one to study during spare time. Another stupendous advantage, if the provider is carefully chosen, is the fact that most courses offered provide opportunities for students to obtain clarification or additional information by mail or email, which can be of priceless value to those needing specialized knowledge. No matter where you live, you can share the benefits. The self-disciplined one receives from a definite program of specialized studies, makes up to some extent for the wasted opportunity when knowledge was available without cost. The home study method of training is especially suited to the needs of employed people who find after leaving school that they must acquire additional specialized knowledge but cannot spare the time to go back to school. The continuously changing economic conditions in our society have made it necessary for thousands of people to find additional or new sources of income. For the majority, the solution to the problem may be found only by acquiring specialized knowledge. Many will be forced to change their occupations entirely. When a merchant finds that a certain line of merchandise is not selling, he usually supplants it with another that is in demand. The person whose business is that of marketing their services must also be an efficient merchant. If their services do not bring adequate returns in one occupation, they must change to another where broader opportunities are available. The person who stops studying merely because they have finished school is forever hopelessly doomed to mediocrity, no matter what their calling. This way of success is the way of continuous pursuit of knowledge. Let us consider a specific instance. During an economic downturn, a salesman in a grocery store was made redundant. Rather than seek a job in an economy where jobs were scarce, he chose to create a business of his own. Having had some bookkeeping experience, he took a special course in accounting, familiarizing himself with the latest bookkeeping techniques and office equipment. Starting with the grocer from whom he had formerly worked, he made his idea was so practical that he soon found it necessary to set up a portable office in a light delivery truck, which he equipped with modern office equipment. He now has a fleet of these bookkeeping offices on wheels and employs a large staff of assistants, thus providing small merchants with accounting service equal to the best money can buy.
Please allow us to pay a few bills and take a station break as we patronize our wonderful sponsors. We'll be right back with the Relevance Podcast.
Successful business. Specialized knowledge plus imagination were the ingredients that went into this unique and successful business. Last year, the owner of that business paid income tax almost 10 times as much as he was paid by the merchant for whom he once worked. The loss of the job forced him a temporary adversity that proved to be a blessing in disguise. The beginning of the successful business was an idea. Inasmuch as I had the privilege of supplying the unemployed salesman with that idea, I now assume the further privilege of suggesting another idea that has within it the possibility of even greater income, plus the possibility of rendering useful service to thousands of people who badly need that service. The idea was suggested to the salesman, who gave up selling and went into business of keeping books on a wholesale basis. When the plan was suggested as a solution to his unemployment problem, he quickly exclaimed, "I like the idea, but I would not know how to turn it into cash." In other words, he complained that he would not know how to market his bookkeeping knowledge after he acquired it. So that brought up another problem to be solved. With the aid of a young woman clever at hand lettering and who could put the story together, a very attractive book was prepared, describing the advantages of the new system of bookkeeping. The pages were nearly typed and pasted into an ordinary scrapbook, which was used as a sales tool. The story of this new business was so effectively told that its owner soon had more accounts than he could handle. Thousands of people need the services of a merchandising specialist capable of preparing an attractive brief for use in marketing their services. The aggressive annual income from such a service might easily exceed that received by the largest employment agency, and the benefits of the service might be made far greater to the purchaser than any to be obtained from an employment agency. The idea here described was born of necessity to bridge an emergency that had to be covered, but it did not stop by merely serving one person. The woman who had created the idea has a keen imagination. She saw in her newly born brainchild the making of a new profession, once destined to provide valuable service to thousands of people who need practical guidance in marketing their services. Spurred to action by the instantaneous success of her first prepared plan to market services, this energetic woman turned next to the solution of a similar problem for her son, who had just finished college but had been totally unable to find a market for his services. The plan she originated for his use was the finest specimen of merchandising of services I have ever seen. When the plan book had been completed, it contained nearly 50 pages of beautifully typed, properly organized information telling the story of her son's natural ability, schooling, personal experiences, and a great variety of other information too extensive for description. The plan book also contained a complete description of the position her son desired, together with a marvelous word picture of the exact plan he would use in filing the position. The preparation of the plan required several weeks' labor, during which time its creator sent her son to the public library almost daily to procure data needed in selling his services to the best advantage. She also of his prospective employer and gathered from them vital information concerning their business methods, which was of great value in the information of the plan he intended to use in filling the position he sought. When the plan had been finished, it contained more than a half a dozen very fine suggestions for the use of benefit of the prospective employer, which were put to use by the company after he was hired. It contained more than half a dozen very fine suggestions for the use and benefit of the prospective employer, which were put to use by the company after he was hired. One may be inclined to ask, why go through all this trouble to secure a job? The answer is straight to the point. It is also dramatic because it deals with a subject which assumes the proportion of a tragedy which millions of men and women whose sole source of income is their services. The answer is, doing a thing well is never trouble. The plan prepared by this woman for the benefit of her son at the first interview and at a salary fixed by himself. Moreover, and this too is important, the position did not require the young man to start at the bottom. He began as a junior executive at an executive's salary. Why go through all this trouble, do you ask? Well, for one thing, the planned presentation of this young man's application for a position clipped off no less than 10 years of time he would have required to get where he began had he started at the bottom and worked his way up. This idea of starting at the bottom and working one's way up may appear sound, but the major objection to this, too many of the at the bottom. It should be remembered also that the outlook from the bottom is not so very bright or encouraging. It has a tendency to kill off ambition. We call it getting into a rut, which means we accept our fate because we form the habit of daily routine, a habit that finally becomes so strong we cease to try to throw it off. And there's another reason why it pays to start one or two steps above the bottom. By doing so, one forms a habit of looking around or observing how others get ahead, of seeing opportunity and of embracing it without hesitation. Dan Haplin is a splendid example of what I mean. During his college days, he was student manager of the famous 1930 National Championship Notre Dame football team. when it was under the direction of the great football coach Knute Rockne. Perhaps he was inspired by Rockne to aim high and not mistake temporary defeat for failure, just as Andrew Carnegie, the great industrial leader, inspired his young business lieutenants to set high goals for themselves. At any rate, young Halpin finished college at a mighty unfavorable time. So after a fling at investment banking and motion pictures, he took the first opportunity with a potential future he could find. Selling electrical hearing aids on a commission basis. Anyone could start in that sort of job, and Halpin knew it, but it was enough to open the door of opportunity to him. For almost 2 years, he continued in a job not to his liking, and he would never have risen above that job if he had not done something about his dissatisfaction. He aimed first at the job of assistant sales manager of his company and got the job. That one step upwards placed him high enough above the crowd to enable him to see greater opportunity. In addition, it placed him where opportunity could see him. He made such a fine record selling hearing aids that A.M. Andrews, chairman of the board of the Dictograph Products Company, a business competitor, took notice. He wanted to know something about that man, Dan Halpin, who was taking big sales away from the long-established Dictograph Company. He sent for Halpin. When the interview was over, Halpin was the new sales manager in charge of Dictograph's acquisition division. Then, to test young Halpin's mettle, Mr. Andrew went away to Florida for 3 months, leaving him to sink or swim in his new job. He did not sink. Knute Rockne's spirit of all the world loves a winner and no one has time for a loser inspired him to put so much into his job that he was elected vice president of the company and general manager of that department, a job which most men would be proud to earn through 10 years of loyal effort. Halpin turned the trick in little more than 6 months. It is difficult to say whether Mr. Andrews or Mr. Halpin is more deserving of eulogy, as both showed evidence of having an abundance of that very rare quality known as imagination. Mr. Andrews deserves credit for seeing in young Halpin a go-getter of the highest order. Halpin deserves credit for refusing to compromise with life by accepting and keeping a job he did not want. That is one of the major points I'm trying to emphasize through this entire philosophy, that we rise to high positions or remain at the bottom because of conditions we can control if we desire to control them. I'm also trying to emphasize another point, namely that both success and failure are largely the results of habit. I have not the slightest doubt that Dan Halpin's close association with the greatest football coach America ever knew planted in his mind the same brand of desire to excel which made the Notre Dame football team world famous. Truly, there is something to the idea that hero worship is helpful, provided one's worship's a winner. Halpin tells me that Rockne was one of the world's greatest leaders of men in all history. My belief in this theory that business associations are vital factors, both in failure and in success, was demonstrated when my son Blair was negotiating. My belief in the theory that business associations are vital factors, both in failure and in success, was demonstrated when my son Blair was negotiating with Dan Halpin for a position. Mr. Halpin offered him a starting salary of about half what he could have gotten from a rival company. I brought parental pressure to bear and induced him to accept the place with Mr. Halpin because I believe that close association with one who refuses to compromise with circumstances he does not like is an asset that can never be measured in terms of money. Having one's skills to become top in one's field is not limited to people in business. Michael Jordan played every step to become one of the greatest athletes of his generation. He has always had the determination to win and the willpower to keep in shape and play his very best. He is committed to maintaining high standards and improving his own records. Jordan learned this lesson early, In high school, he was dropped from the team, but his determination to be reinstated led him to starting a heavy practice regime daily, which he still follows. He takes each doubt as a challenge, and each year he's had a new incentive. When he returned to basketball after 5 years of being away from the game, his critics said he was past his prime, that he was slower and couldn't win another championship. He took this as a challenge. It just honed his determination to show them that they were wrong. He worked harder than ever. He designed a year-round training program with his personal trainer and his own gym and weight room. He recognized that as one grows older, the body starts giving signals you must listen to, and that it is essential to do things correctly to stay in the best shape possible to consistently play at championship level. The results were astounding. Jordan led his team to the championship in 96 and 97, and in both years was named the most valuable player. Michael Jordan's determination is a lesson to all of us if we are determined to achieve our goals. Neither our age nor the skepticism of others can deter us. But determination is only the first step. It must be followed by hard work, a regime of physical and mental exercise, and whatever it takes to bring us to peak performance. The bottom is a monotonous, dreary, unprofitable place for any person. That is why I've taken the time to describe how proper planning may circumvent lowly beginnings. Also, that is why so much space has been devoted to a description of this new profession, created by a woman who was inspired to do a fine job of planning because she wanted her son to have a favorable break. When the economy slows down and jobs become scarce, a means of creating newer and better ways of marketing our services is needed. It is hard to determine why someone had not previously discovered this stupendous need in view of the fact that more money changes hands in return for services than any other purpose. The sum paid out monthly to people who work for wages and salaries is so huge that it runs into the hundreds of millions, and the annual distribution amounts to billions. Perhaps some will find in the idea, briefly described, the nucleus of the riches they desire. Ideas with much less merit have been the seedlings from which great fortunes have grown. Woolworth's 5 and 10 cent store idea, for example, had far less merit, but it piled up a fortune for its creator. Those seeing opportunity lurking in this suggestion will find valuable aid in the chapter on organized planning. Incidentally, an efficient marketer of services would find a growing demand for his services wherever there are men and women who seek better markets for their services. By applying the mastermind principle, a few people with suitable talent could form an alliance and have a paying business very quickly. One would need to be a fair writer with a flair for advertising and selling, one handy at graphic design, and one should be a first-class business getter who would let the world know about the service. If one possessed all of these abilities, he or she might carry on the business alone until it became too big for one person to handle. The woman who prepared the sales plan for her son received requests from all parts of the country for her cooperation in preparing similar plans for others who desired to market their services for more money. She eventually supervised a staff of expert typists, artists, and writers who had the ability to dramatize the case history so effectively that one's services could be marketed for much more money than the prevailing wages for similar services. She was so confident of her ability that she accepted as a major portion of her fee a percentage of the increased pay she helped her clients earn. It must not have been supposed that her plan merely consisted of clever salesmanship by which she helped men and women to demand and receive more money for the same services they formerly sold for less pay. It must not be supposed that her plan merely consisted of clever salesmanship by which she helped men and women to demand and receive more money for the same services they formerly sold for less pay. She looked after the interests of the purchaser as well as the seller of services, and so prepared her plans that the employer would receive full value for the additional money paid. The method by which she accomplished this astounding result is a professional secret that she disclosed to no one except her own clients. If you have the imagination and seek a more profitable outlet for your services, this suggestion may be the stimulus for which you have been searching. The idea is capable of yielding an income far greater than that of the average doctor, lawyer, or engineer whose education requires several years in college. The idea is sellable to those seeking new positions in practically all positions calling for managerial or executive ability, and those desiring rearrangements of income in their present positions. There is no fixed price for sound ideas. Underpinning all ideas is specialized knowledge. For those who do not find riches in abundance, specialized knowledge is more abundant and more easily acquired than ideas. Because of this very truth, there's a universal demand and an ever-increasing opportunity for the person capable of helping men and women sell their services advantageously. Capability means imagination, the one quality needed to combine specialized knowledge with ideas in the form of organized plans designed to yield riches. If you have imagination, this chapter may present you with an idea sufficient to serve as the beginning of the riches you desire. Remember, the idea is the main thing. Specialized knowledge may be found just around the corner, any corner.
As always, thanks for listening in on the show. And be sure to check out Mike's book, A Simple Guide to Child Support Redemption, available on Amazon.com, or his mobile app, Child Support Made Simple, CSMSX, available through the Google Play Store. And for the latest in current events and videos that really matter, be sure to log on to Mike's YouTube page, author Mike R. Aikins, or his website at www.relevancepodcast.com. As always, thanks for listening in on the show. And be sure to check out Mike's book, A Simple Guide to Child Support Redemption, available on Amazon.com, or his mobile app, Child Support Made Simple, CSMSX, available through the Google Play Store. And for the latest in current events and videos that really matter, be sure to log on to Mike's YouTube page, author Mike R. Aikins, or his website at www.relevancepodcast.com.